I was going to just let Roman go ahead and preach. I started walking up here and realized I hadn't put my microphone on. And that ain't going to work because I'm not standing there. So, Matthew 15. Matthew chapter 15. Let's talk for a few minutes. Has anybody ever looked at you and said, "You're a dirty old dog"? You probably wouldn't say, "Thank you. May I have another?" More than likely, right? If somebody looks at you and says, "You're a dog," their intention, we think, we know, is you just said something ready for some fighting words. That's what that is. So when you read this passage, it sounds strange. Ainsley said, "We're going to study the Bible tonight?" I said, "Yeah." What are we going to talk about? When Jesus called somebody a dog, do you think that was very nice? Well, no, it wasn't. But that just doesn't seem right either, does it? Because Jesus was nice. Let's understand this passage. Parallel passage is Mark chapter 7, starting in verse 24. Every now and then we try to unfold a difficult passage of Scripture. This is one that was turned in for us to consider for a few minutes. I want us to notice three things: the context of the event. I want to see the content of the woman, her heart, and then I want to see the construction of Jesus' response. All right, let's notice what's going on first of all. Jesus departed and he went to Tyre and Sidon, which is northwest of Canaan. It was a land that had been conquered by Solomon, and then he gave it to King Hiram, whose son deeded it back to Israel for a time. So it was on the northern border of the northernmost part of God's promised land for his people. And it's an odd thing because Jesus left Canaan and went into a Gentile area. Now, Mark says that he went there to get away. And he went to a private house and he didn't want anybody to know about it. So you have a situation in this context where Jesus has gone to find rest, to find solitude, to get away from the stress and the strain of the ministry that he had, which was to the house of Israel. In this land, we find that there was a woman. Now, Canaan is a descriptive term that describes that entire region, not just the part where the Israelites happened to be. And that song, I'm sure, Josh, at least I think you may have led that song knowing we were going to talk about this, right? Go ahead and say, "Yes, I was figuring ahead." There you go. Trying to help you out here, son. So he looked ahead and he said, Canaan's in here. We're going to sing about camping toward Canaan land. Well, yeah, they went into Canaan, but it's bigger than the promised land. And so she's a woman from Canaan, but north of the Palestine area. She has a real problem, of course, because her daughter is demon-possessed. And therefore, you have her coming to Jesus and wanting some help, and you have the disciples, and this is the story. Apparently, he is in a Gentile area, but he had not been sent to the Gentiles, so just getting away for rest and relaxation. That's the context of what's going on. Now let's learn about this woman. This woman, if you have read this story before, you may have had a problem understanding why Jesus approached her the way he did, but I doubt you ever had a problem with the woman because she is impressive. I mean, this woman is really impressive because in our words, in our terminology, it looks like Jesus just backhanded her. And then she came back in a wonderful way. Let's notice the kind of person she was. According to verse 22, it says that she cried out. Apparently she was walking and maybe running behind them and crying out continuously and saying, "Help me, I want some help." This was a woman who, notice verse 22, she was a believer in Jesus. Though not Jewish, apparently, she was a believer. Now, Mark records that she was a Greek woman, probably because most of his readers were Gentiles, Greeks. Matthew writes to Jews, and so he identifies her with the term of where she was from, and they would understand the geography and the connection of years gone by to the people of God. But she's a believer. She said, "You are the son of David." That's a fascinating thing for a Gentile woman to say. Why would she identify Jesus as the son of David? Not saying, obviously not the case, that she is giving a genealogical report. She's not saying, "I know that your great-great-great-great-grandpa was David." No, that term, son of David, was a particular term that called Jesus out as the fulfillment of prophecy coming through the lineage of David to be the king of Israel. And she was accepting that fact. She was one who believed that Jesus could heal her. I don't know why she did that. We don't have any record as to her ever visiting. We don't have record that Jesus had been there before. In fact, we don't find a miracle prior to this time in that area. And in fact, after he did this miracle, he left. Maybe she'd heard the stories. Earlier in the book of Matthew, he records a number of cases where Gentiles had come to Jesus in order to be healed. Maybe the most famous one is the centurion, right? You remember Jesus' comment? "I've not found that a great a faith in Israel like I've found in you." And so there are Gentile people who knew about the healings of Jesus, and therefore maybe through them she had heard the report. And so she was one who believed that that could actually happen and would happen. Now, when she's calling out to Jesus and the disciples are saying, "You got to fix this situation," she doesn't stop, even though Jesus seems to ignore her. Verse 23, he didn't respond to her. It's almost like he turned back or just didn't acknowledge that she was even talking. And yet she continued to cry out. And then in verse 25, she came and worshiped him. Now this word, to worship, is the word that means she came and she fell down in front of him and she grabbed his feet and she's holding on and worshiping him. This woman had a tremendous character, a wonderful faith. Here's another thing. Here's a woman who accepted graciously her place in society. We're going to see that in just a second. I want to go back and look at these verses again. But she doesn't seem angry. She doesn't seem upset. But she acknowledges, "This is who I am." And she accepted it and moved forward. In fact, Jesus closes out in verse 28 talking about how great a faith this woman had. Now, look at the disciples. Part of understanding this difficult text for me was recognizing the terminology and the way things were playing out. Go back again. She is crying out, and it is the disciples in the end of verse 23. His disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she cries out after us." He answered and said, now who's he talking to? The disciples. He said to the disciples, "I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." He understood that what the disciples was asking was to honor her request. It wasn't, you remember when the parents were bringing the babies to see Jesus and they tried to stop them? Quit, you got to stop, he's tired, stay away. And it was Jesus who stopped them and said, don't you do that. You let the little children come to me, right? But on this occasion, the way this is written, it appears that the disciples, instead of being upset that she was crying out after them, it appears instead that they were saying, Jesus, come on now, just help her. Because if you help her, she'll go away. We came up here to get away. We came up here to rest. We came up here for peace and calm. And she's really creating a scene. Just help her and she'll go away. That seems to be the indication of the passage. Then he says, after she said, help me, Jesus responds, it's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. Now, unfortunately, the Gentiles at this time understood that a whole lot differently than you and I. I mean, it was a common thing to understand. The Jews had this mightier than thou attitude, and they looked at themselves as the people of God, and the Gentiles, they're dogs. So it's not a good term. It's not a positive thing. It's not that they enjoyed being called that, but they understood it. They got it. But this woman really got it. Because listen to the exchange. Don't take the children's bread and give it to the little dogs. Well, now here's the question. Where are the children? When it's time to eat bread, where are the children? In the house, at the table. Where are the dogs? They're not outside. Joe, that's where they ought to be, but they're not outside. That's right. But what are they doing? It's apparently that they're house dogs. And so what she is saying is this, you're right. You don't take the bread off the table that the children are going to eat and throw it over there to the dogs and let them eat it. But she said this, in our terminology, every household that has these dogs, when the children are eating, they're going to spill some food, right? You can always tell where children have been sitting. Restaurants, home, church building, doesn't matter. You know where they are, right? And I'm supposing in the church building that's children. Might be a few of adults, I don't know. Bringing stuff in here to eat, I don't know. But here's the point. She said, hey, check this out. They don't stop the dogs from eating. So what was her understanding? Her understanding was that Jesus was the Jewish Messiah. He was sent to the house of Israel. She knew that. So she was saying to Jesus, okay, I know you have a job, a mission, and I accept that. But if you give me this little bit, that's not going to change the mission. What are you taking away from the Jews by letting me have this little morsel? Nothing. Just like in the house. Do you feel upset when the children drop some food and an animal that's in the house, cat or a dog, eats it? Do you get upset about that? Like, wow, that's just taking food right out of my kid's mouth. No. That's just what you do so you don't have to get the vacuum cleaner out. Bring the dog in, have something to eat, right? That's what she's saying. She said, look, I know your mission. I accept it. But you can let me have this little bit. Give me the crumbs. Because she knew that the power of Jesus to do this was but a crumb, a drop in the bucket to the power that Jesus had. So now, notice the construction of Jesus' response. His first response was no response. Master, help me. And he just kept on going. when the disciples brought it up, he talked to them, not her. But then after she came at him again, worshiping at his feet, then he spoke to her. Then he challenged her. And when she met the challenge, he said, "Go your way. The demon has left your daughter." Now, Jesus, the key to this whole thing is to understand, obviously, that Jesus was not being mean. He wasn't being ugly. He was not trying to put her down, slap her in the face. It was a teaching moment for him. Obviously, he knew her heart. A couple of things might have been at play. Number one, she approached him as a person of faith. Okay, let's put that faith to a test. Isn't that what James talked about in James chapter 1? Let patience have its perfect work. Maybe he was saying, you've expressed some faith. Now let's test it. Let's challenge it a little bit. And buddy, he challenged it. And she came out shining powerfully. Maybe this is the construction reason for his approach. Maybe he was thinking, or he was doing this. She's not a Jewish person. She's not apparently a professing worshiper of the God of Israel. So it might be necessary to have a little more faith proof. Not only so she could own it better, but so that everybody else would see it. And so in his approach to her, he challenges her in such a way that she could now own her faith as he challenged it. But also so that his disciples and everybody else around would be able to see that she really did have faith. This is not just a woman who was seeking to have her daughter healed. When your child is hurting, man, you'll do absolutely anything to fix it. And so she was going to do anything. And it might appear that she would do or say anything at all just to get a miracle, just to get a healing. Come on. That happened in John 6. Jesus said, you're not coming to hear me talk, preach, teach. All you're doing is coming because I multiplied bread and fish and gave you something to eat. They wanted the miracle. Herod, at the end, wanted, perform a miracle. In one place Jesus went, the people there wanted him to perform a miracle. This was not her approaching Jesus. Come on, just perform a miracle and help me out selfishly. This was his way of verifying that what was behind her request was true faith. How else could he help all of these people see what she was going through? How else could he show her the faith or show her faith to them? One final point. Since Jesus knew her heart as he does ours, he knows how much discipline we need to bring out our best. He knows what kind of stuff we need to help us mature. And in Hebrews chapter 12, when the writer says that God disciplines his children, here is one of his children by faith, not by birth, but by faith. And he is giving her just enough discipline to get her to the point not only that she could own her own faith, but that everybody else would be able to see it. Jesus did not call her a dog in a negative and mean and nasty way. But he did use a term that would draw her closer and would express her faith in front of everyone. Well, that's what he wants. He wants us to get to that point where we are willing to express our faith in front of others. We are to be the people we talked about in 1 Peter this morning who have been called out of darkness into his marvelous light, that we can proclaim the praises of him who called us out of that darkness into his marvelous light. We're to express, proclaim, spread his faith as our faith so that we can let everyone know and buy into it as well. Tonight, maybe you're ready to express your faith. Maybe you're ready to say, Lord, I believe in you. I accept you. I know that you are the Son of God. And I know that you were sent here with a mission. And so I'm going to obey. And I'm going to be baptized tonight. And I'm going to have my sins removed because that's what you promised in your word. Or maybe you're saying, okay, she had better faith than I do, and I profess to be a Christian. I'm going to start today. And I'm going to profess it better, louder, stronger, and more often. Maybe you need us to help you with that. Maybe you just need to make that commitment to God. But as is our custom, we sing for your encouragement if we can help you while we stand together.